Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. If you guys are just jumping on, you should have a poll up. We're just trying to get a pulse of who's in the room, and we'll get started in a couple minutes. Thanks for joining on a Friday morning. All right, looks like we have a good mix of folks on the call. So welcome, everyone, if you guys are just joining. Um, we'll have a poll up and we'll get started pretty soon. We're excited to have this topic today because a lot of us are being challenged to um, think and build. And even though it's an exciting time, it's fun to hear from folks that have lived through this journey. So if you guys are just jumping on, you should have a poll up and go ahead and just answer that. That's just so we get a sense of who's on the call. And we'll give it just about one more minute and then we'll dive into the session. Okay. Okay, great. Why don't we go ahead and dive into the session because we are a couple of minutes in. I'll keep that poll up so you guys can just answer as we go through this. I'll just do a quick introduction of myself, and then we'll go ahead and pull everyone else in. So, welcome everyone. This is a session on how accountants can think like product managers. This is a session because all year within the GapSavvy community, we've been talking a lot about vibe coding, what's possible with AI, and a lot of us are building right now. What that means is that on top of the full-time job you already have, you're probably learning all sorts of new skills in the software development lifecycle, deciding what parts are application, what parts are putting your Excel methods on steroids. But one way to really think about this is to think about how you change your mindset and to think like a product manager. I was part of the founding team of Lensing, formerly called Everest. And so these were some of my teammates, Sandeep, who's the co-founder, and Danny, who transitioned from product or to product from the role of the controller. So I thought, what better way for us to learn together than to hear about how that journey went? So we started the journey in 2020. That has morphed. We are all the way in 2026, and the world has changed quite a bit. So we're going to kick off this session with a quick opening of. I wanted to introduce you to Sandeep, who is the one of the co-founders of Everest Systems. I'd love, Sandeep, for you to give an intro of, what lensing is, and maybe start with one of the most exciting things of when I met you back in 2020, because you had this crazy strategy where you thought, instead of hiring generalist product managers who are super, super smart and teach them the hard craft of accounting, instead, let's take people who know accounting deeply and teach them product management. So give us a little bit about your background. I love what you've done in your past at Viva, which was also highly verticalized. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then maybe we can go into your thought process of why you started this ERP company from that direction versus another.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. Thanks for having me here, and great to talk to all of you. So my background in a nutshell, varied background from management consulting at Deloitte, where I started my career in their National Center of Excellence, coming up with new service lines around security and privacy. Then spent a number of years at a company that was in application infrastructure and security, that was also a Solex partner to SAP, which meant we co-sold with SAP on the security aspects of their solution. And then I ended up at a company that was most popular for defining this industry cloud vertical SaaS, which is a company called Viva Systems that has built mission critical applications for the life sciences industry, applications like clinical trials, manufacturing, content management, and so on. And so all of my experiences from consulting to early product and early go to market were really all around mission critical business software. And when we started lensing at the time, Everest, we had this decision, as you articulated. Now, how do we want to focus on the product? Do we want to focus on the product using a lot of folks that have come from software product management, myself being an example of that, and then kind of learning accounting. Maybe they have some background in accounting, but they're not experts in accounting, or go the other way around, which is start with experts in accounting and then they learn the software product management skills along the way. And I think what gave us the intuition to go down the path that we did is myself and my co-founder, we just kind of looked at when we'd worked on mission critical business software before, and when it got really hard and really domain rich, it turned out that the best product managers I'd seen in my career actually all at some point came from the domain. Product management is a very cross-functional discipline. You have to understand the market, you have to understand customers very deeply, you have to understand technology. Everything's always changing, and so you have to be really flexible. But the 1.0 journey of product management is different in that you don't have any customers yet. And so I think when you have no customers, you have to start with some raw insight, or if nothing else, empathy for the actual person doing the job. And that empathy is best served by folks that have actually been in those shoes, that have scaled companies. They might be wrong sometimes, they might be right sometimes. That's going to always happen in products. But I think that initial raw energy around what the real problems are that are worth solving, that usually comes from the domain experts themselves. And that's why we banked on that strategy early on.
Yeah. I find that fascinating. Can you tell me what do typical, like even if you're building accounting software, what is the typical product person background when you're hiring for that role? Like, well, what would a normal company have done? Like if I was, you know, again, it doesn't matter if you're doing accounting software or non-accounting software. What's the typical product background?
A lot of times typical product backgrounds are folks that are well spoken, they're highly cross-functional, they can talk to development in the morning, they can talk to sales in the afternoon and help with services in the evening. And that's really incredibly valuable, especially when you have customers and you're starting to get to product market fit already and you're really trying to scale product market fit. But at the beginning of the journey, right? That's the beginning of the journey, you have no product market fit. You don't even know if the thing that you're building is actually worth solving for. So I think it's a quite different process early on where you're trying to figure out the strategy of the company, figure out who really the buyer is, what are they willing to pay for, what's a problem worth solving, right? What's going to be hard to replicate versus not. And so I think that's where this domain expertise and really kind of heavily banking on that, that's where that really comes from. And the skills of the job, by the way, vary a lot, right? The skills of the job that are pre-product market fit and pre in the market are quite different than the skills of the job once you're in the market and you're competing and you have to just iterate really quickly. So it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just that I think depending on what you're building and who you're building it for, I think certain aspects of your background are more useful at a given point in time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. When you described that, I was thinking accountants do that all day, every day. We're always the glue between the entire company. You got to keep everyone happy, and everyone's like either mad at you or you're asking for data. And I was like, oh, that I could see why the the traits transfer. One thing that I would love to share that for you to share with people is like I remember when I was there, and we were kind of building out the team in terms of like hiring, you taught me a little bit about what traits you were looking for. I found those to be kind of fascinating because some of them differed from the accounting world, but like I'm gonna just say one because this one I thought was fascinating. I would love your comment on it. You were like, I'm looking for someone who can get a new set of data and change their mind. I was like, wow, that's fascinating, right? Because there's like a little bit of nimbleness and humility. And obviously, we had the empathy because there's a lot of software that sucks in accounting, which is why I think we're all excited that we can build now. But tell me a little about what you hired for and what your thought process was behind that.
Yeah, I think this is sort of the interesting dichotomy of this job, right? Is that the skills that can help you get started, that give you the raw insight to begin with, are the same skills that can hold you back if left unchecked. So one of the hardest things in product is like even the smartest people, regardless of whether they're accountants or software people or people from, a different industry, they're still wrong quite a bit. And so the question is like, how are you going to find out that you're wrong as quickly as possible so you can correct your thinking and then build a better product for the industry or for the community that you're building it for. And so I think everyone's wrong. It's just how quickly can you really really correct yourself, but also how deeply are you willing to listen to other people and how to listen, right? So a lot of people, for example, I'll tell you in product, you can talk to hundreds of people and you'll get pain points galore. Like every big hard problem in the world has lots and lots of pain points, right? So finding pain points isn't hard. What's hard is synthesizing the pain points into producing something cohesive that can be put together as a product. But then even that's going to be wrong 30, 40% of the time. And so I think it's this massive iteration process that you have to go through, which I think is hard for anybody. But I do think one of the number one, one of the top skills for any product manager is, yeah, exactly the way you said it, is how quickly you can change your mind if the right information is presented to you.
I love it. Um, yeah, I found that fascinating because I think that if I think about what kind of gets in our way, and we'll quickly go into Danny's section, I want you guys to know that we have a Q&A running. If you guys have questions, go ahead and drop them in there. We'll have them upvoted. You can do that. We'd love to take those questions together. But the reason why I'm going so hard into this mindset thing is because I actually think this is the number one thing that we have to learn. Accountants are very good at being right at things, and we're very good at being experts. That nimbleness and that humility. I'm not saying that we're not, we don't have humility. But I think that that's the little muscle, which is like, can we work that muscle of iteration, which has been so fascinating to learn in the transition to building product. Okay. Sandeep will be on the line the entire time. We'll actually banter through this, but we didn't want to, we wanted to get to the meat of this as fast as possible. So I want to introduce you to Danny on the team. So Danny was one of the first hires at Everest. And so let me pull her up. Um, Sorry, I'm trying to do this all at the same time. There we go. Hi, Danny.
Hey.
Um, Danny was the controller at Agilov, and she was also at Docker. She is extraordinary at intercompany crazy everything. She was brought on at Everest, now called Lensing. Apologies, these are old habits. Uh, to build out that record report function in GL. She has an amazing story, but you can think about the attributes that Sandeep just mentioned that we were looking for in a product manager. They were all embodied in when we met Danny. Her agility, curiosity, nimbleness of thinking. I'm not going to pump you up too much because I know it's the beginning of the webinar. But I want you guys to get a sense of how she thinks, how she transitioned, and she's going to be super honest about like what was hard about the transition, what was new about the transition, and maybe what felt a little too familiar about knowing way too many pain points to solve for. So Danny, with that, I'm going to flip this over to you. Give a quick intro and let's dive into quick intro slides. And then she's going to get to the demo of how she's building, which is really fascinating, especially with the change of AI. All right, Danny, stage is yours.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, no, happy to be here. Yeah, so my name is Danny. I currently I'm head of the part for record to report and procure to pay. I wanted to give a little background on, where I'm coming from and what I have done so that, if you're an accountant or, have that similar background, this like you can see yourself in a similar position in terms of like, what can you do also with this type of background. So I moved from Venezuela to the Bay Area in 2014, and as you see here, I have held several jobs in both accounting and finance. Now leading the record to report and procure to pay areas at Lensing. And the just quick background that I wanted to give you how I got to Lensing. Back in the day, 2021, the folks from Everest back then, Sandeep and Jackson back then, they reached out for feedback in the very early product, maybe just a few screens. And, long story short, a few months after I joined, and I have not looked back since. I think it's a really cool transition that I've done. And it's not something I was like, oh, I'm not doing accounting anymore. I actually get to do even more accounting because I actually have to think about how accounting works, not just of the fact of like, it is from your day job. And so it's like you have to kind of break the pieces down into like how can you put it into, a software. So I wanted to start here more for like coming from accounting. We all think that, whether you're building a spreadsheet, you're building a feature, you're building whatever you want to be able to do your job well, you want control and you want to do things the way that you think it's best for you and your team and your company. And so with the world of AI, you're doing a lot of these things maybe with prompting and, doing all that. And so it's really cool because it can seem fun and easy, but, at the end, it's going to take you 1 hour to do that 80% of what you want. Now, what I noticed after playing with this, and this is also part of, the product management, that sometimes not everything goes as what you expect. And so in this case, one of the things that I've noticed is 20% of what you may need after, it may take you a lot of iterations, maybe because there's a lot of complexity. And in this case of AI, sometimes, maybe AI doesn't understand that complexity. Maybe it does, but over complicates things. The changes may be painful to track or like even maintain. But then, the more context that you give to AI or prompting, sometimes it can get even more complex that it can change things. You can have a report and you say, hey, now add this other thing. And then suddenly the report changed drastically. And sometimes you don't even know why or how to go back to it. So that what I've noticed, that at the end, prompting seems easy, but at the end it can feel like a trap in some cases. And so just be mindful of that for people that are building or like would like to build. And so kind of going back to like what product managers do, that's pretty much what product managers have to navigate every day. But today I want to show you a little bit of how you can think about how to do your own features, but also think like a product manager. Before I do that, I wanted to go over a little bit of what's a day in the life of a product manager. And so what do we do in the day-to-day is, you start by looking into products, you look at launching new products, you look at strategy and the market research, you talk to users, like Sandeep was saying, like you have to talk to customers to see like what the pain points are so that what you're building. Based on all that, then you have to prioritize requests, which is not easy. It's one of the hardest things that you have to do because you have flooding of information, so you have to kind of see how everything goes. You have to support new business models depending on how you're trying to build your company and how you want to grow it. But also depending on the companies that you're talking with, you may have one feature that solves maybe for 50% of the use cases, but then you have one more customer that has a net new one. That might be an edge case. You want to allow for that. As well, you have to support and continue to grow existing products. And also, make sure that your product has adoption. If it doesn't have enough, you have to make sure that adoption increases. And then last but not least is document and maintain, document, release notes, make sure that the product is, that we have help docs and stuff so that people can actually know how to use it. But there's more to this in what product managers do, but this is sort of the highlight that I wanted to provide for everyone.
Yeah, Danny, this is fascinating. I know you're going to do this bridge slide, but when I saw that increased session, I was thinking, oh, that's like that's a specific like product thing. But now I'm thinking about how people are building within the organizations, and you might build this one dashboard that's amazing. But actually, even within teams, people are now working through like, how do I get other people to use this thing? What thing are we going to push through? So maybe that skill and that feedback loop of understanding like what's useful and what's not is actually more the product taste that people are going to have to pick up as well. So I'll let you go to the next slide, but I just noticed that when you were talking.
No, it's a great comment. I think it's kind of a segue to how I was going to describe this, like kind of going from accounting to product management. There's some comparable things that you can say, well, in accounting, I do this, in product management, feels similar, but with a slightly different angle. So, from an accounting side, like accountants, for them or for us, every number is a source or has a source. And so for product managers, well, every feature has a real need. It goes to a customer pain point. Like it comes from somewhere. You're not just like making up a solution out of nowhere. For accountants, like the domain knowledge and understanding the software functionality is key. Well, for product managers, understanding the use cases that are coming from customers, but also understanding how something can be built piece by piece. And I just wanted to give a little bit of maybe background on this piece because when I started at Lensing, we, the record to report area didn't have anything. We didn't have anything. So all we had was a just list of chart of accounts that we couldn't do anything. And so, at the end you think, okay, I want to have consolidation. Well, no, you cannot until you go from the beginning and you can start building chart of accounts and you start building journal entries. You go step by step to get there. So that's what I mean, piece by piece. And sometimes you can have an assumption that maybe a system or maybe something is already done, but in that case, it may not. And so you kind of have to think those pieces before you even, consider your full build. Also, accountants, there's a lot of judgment and business edge cases. Well, it is the same for product management on, well, they have to spot what it breaks in a spec or in a feature. Sometimes we may not have a use case, so we have to capture that way. Accountants go from owning a close start to end. From product managers, you own the feature from prompt or from definition to shipping. And then accountants, this is something that I think it translates pretty well to what product managers do. You have to explain processes to auditors. You have to explain variances to auditors and CFOs and boards, like a lot of these, sometimes even to people that don't understand accounting. And so in product management, especially in a very domain-rich accounting feature, for example, you have to explain to someone the feature without much understanding of what that accounting means. So you have to let them understand sort of what you're going from and even teach them the accounting behind even before you build the feature so that then the feature does what you want them, what you want to do. And I'll explain this a little bit on the demo that I'm going to show you because some topics can be a little heavy in terms of the domain knowledge and sometimes not necessarily in terms of like the accounting domain knowledge, but more about like all the moving pieces that it has. And so those things you have to kind of describe to the devs, developers to understand what they need to build.
Yeah, I want to jump in here, but I wanted to get you to the demo because this piece, I feel like the translation layer, this is one of the hardest things. Like, I think even in industry, most of us have tried to explain to our IT departments or engineering departments like what we actually need, and you kind of see their eyes glaze over. And you're like, no, 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 no. I need you to round in the first period when you put a number over time, right? Like, this just like little tiny details, or like, I need you to hit this specific requirement. We actually have so many requirements that I think that it's this translation layer that is a skill, but it also gets faster with AI. So I'll let you jump there, but I don't know who hasn't felt that even within industry. So quite interesting.
Yeah, I think I have one more slide before the demo. This is a high level kind of workflow on how I built what I built. And so you go from context. In the past, when we didn't have AI, you would build with you would create your own feature definition, in a Google Doc. But now that we have AI, we're able to provide all that context into, Claude in this case, which is what I used. You provide the use cases, you may provide some screens that you may have, you may provide additional requirements that you think high level, it's going to make your feature work. Now, what's fascinating now, it's like you can actually see what you mean by prompting, by providing all that context. Before, you would have to kind of maybe rely on design or, whiteboard or do all those things that maybe miss in translation what you mean by that. And so by seeing this prototype, even though that it looks kind of ugly, raw, like, colors and all that, at the end, it kind of, shapes or translates what you may have in your mind and trying to explain to others. What then we did is, so we use Claude Design that we have our Everest or Lensing design system. We put that in there and made it look more like what Everest looks. That way, we don't just ship something that, it could look like an application from something else. We just want it to feel and look like our product. So that it considers like components, states, and hierarchies applied to the same screens and kind of in a similar way. And then the next step, which this is something that used to be a little kind of backwards before. We used to do like the feature definition and the spec and then turn that into the mock. In this case, we went from the mock that Claude Design created, and then we turned that into the spec that was the kind of handoff that then we gave to the developers to be able to build as well with the Claude Design. And so that assumed like the acceptance criteria. It's like when we thought what we think the feature is considered as, ready, or that we think it's well, like enough for us to ship it. And so that at the end, when we give it to the developers, at this point for with AI, now they're not coding themselves, just like typing it. They're just using Claude and other tools. And then with that, they're able to just review the code. And then, things get shipped much faster. So because I say that things get shipped much faster, I wanted to give you a kind of highlight of, how much faster. From idea to merge, this took less than 2 weeks. For a feature as complicated as the one that I'm going to show you is it could have taken probably a month, if not more, with what we have today. And so, because we had Claude Design, we were able to have the UI running in the product within a day. I was able to see it, maybe iterate a few things. Within 3 days, we had a working version with bugs. Don't get me wrong, there were some ugly bugs, but then those got fixed. But with that, we were able to see what we tried to have from the spec and iterate daily. So I had daily syncs with my developers over the 2 weeks, and I'm still having them because you'll see in the demo I still have some bugs that I'm trying to fix. It's not perfect, but you can actually see what are those you know things from the product management role that are not the best in terms of like the annoying things. And so then because we have the live sandbox technology, I was able to see daily what that could look like even if before it hit production. And so that continued iteration and then having the discussions with the devs. And then by 2 weeks, we were able to have the product merge in production, and then be able to showcase this to our pre-sales team and sales so that they can demo this to prospects or customers that are asking for those features. So at the end for us, yes, a buggy version that we had, it became something that we consider very useful because it turned the feedback into something that was actionable within the same week. So let's say that some customer said, hey, can you add this? Or no, I don't like this. So we were able to take that into account very quickly for iteration. So I'll pause here before I jumped into the demo. I don't know if Angela, you wanna, I don't know, make a comment or anything, or I'll jump to the demo as
I just want a quick comment from Sandeep because we're going to do 2 weeks and this will make more sense. But Sandeep, how long would a process like this? I think we're going to go through accruals, so but how long would a process like this typically take versus the 2 weeks in like a normal product management pre-AI?
Yeah, I mean, you're optimizing multiple steps every step of the way, right? You're optimizing requirements definition and design and code generation, and then testing through the sandboxing technology. So it's end-to-end SDLC that's driven by AI. So I think it varies based on the feature, but I think in this particular case, my guess is it's 50+% faster, right? Using all these AI tools kind of to drive the SDLC entirely.
Okay.
In some cases, when you're doing like this is obviously an end-to-end business process feature that's could be quite complex. In some cases, when you're doing, like bug fixes or minor enhancements, it's going really rapidly, meaning like this changes that Danny has made that have been same day without even developers. But we're
I'm
talking about
demoing
an
that. So
end-to-end process feature here.
yeah, I'm demoing that. So that'll be a cool segue for at the end to show that.
All right. Okay, let's see what it looks like. That's the comparison. And as you transition into the demo, Danny, I'm just gonna say, if any of you guys kind of hit your head against the wall when you're like asking a vendor for new features and they're like, oh, it's in our Q4 roadmap, which is like 3 quarters too late or 2 years too late, this is kind of why. Okay, so go ahead and let's show the demo because I think that
Okay.
everyone's felt.
Yeah. So, so I wanted to like show an example of what I just went through in the last month. Um, Basically, we've been wanting to do an accrual feature or application for a while. So before we weren't able to do it because you know, we had other priorities to do with AI. Now we're like, okay, can we speed it up by doing it that way? And so there are three things that I wanted to show you. Kind of goes back to like, starting from the get-go in the kind of comparison of, you have to start from like how you configure something, then how something gets analyzed, maybe from a user or from AI. And then the two things maybe that matter the most for accountants is like audit trails and reconciliation. So we kind of built everything into one application or like a workbench. We call that accrual workbench because we think that the accruals is not just a report. It's not just a consideration of, hey, an AI agent that can build it for you. We think that there's more to it that requires a lot of moving pieces, different processes, different bills, different sources. And so that's why we wanted to go this route. And I'll explain once I jump to the demo. Now, keep in mind that what I built with the devs, it considers, we used Claude Design and Claude Code to be able to do this. Now, we did that because we have the dev resources in-house to do that. But in lensing, we have tools like AI Specify that allows you to do something like that. But then we also have there are other tools that it could be Lovable, Codex, and other things that allow you to do it separately. And sometimes it can be a little more complicated because you may have to have some knowledge of coding or at least understanding from it. But now let me jump into the demo. Let me exit this and I'm gonna jump into lensing. So the accrual flow starts from the from the close checklist. I'm gonna jump into it and then you'll see, actually I have it open already. So you'll see here that there's a screen that has kind of like a workflow on how you can build it. You have an assumption of entities, periods, and all that. So when you think about building a product, these are all the moving pieces that you have to consider. It's not just like, hey, I build it. And so if you have in an entity in a company that you have multi-entity, you have to capture that, you have to capture multi-currency. So all those moving pieces make things complicated, especially when you have, effects involving to that. How do you handle unrealized gain loss? How do you handle realized gain loss? Those type of things that, maybe from an accounting world, it sounds like, oh, I know that, but then how do you embed that into your application? That is definitely not easy. And so I wanted to start here by looking at the configuration. So kind of mentioned before, we just don't think about the accruals of being just one source of truth. We don't think of it just as historical trends. We think about there's a lot of moving pieces. It can come from unapproved bills. It can come from expense reports. It can come from unbilled services like your legal that, sometimes you don't hear for them 3 months and you still need to get an accrual for that. And so these are things that accountants know, but when devs build this, sometimes you have to explain the context of why you're trying to assume all these criteria. And so in this case, we are allowing to have all the criteria added to here. So if some companies wanted to have some over the others, they can do that. We built in a Gmail NCP as well as a RAMP NCP. We have here, this is currently in beta. I cannot showcase this right now because we did not have the tooling to be able to connect it to a sandbox just in production. And so because I'm in a sandbox, as you see this here, I cannot show that right now, but it's something that if you're interested, you can reach out and then we can show you more. In something that I found really cool is having this MCP connected with Gmail is that if I click here, it's going to read my email. If I have some email correspondence with legal or any unbilled, any companies that do hourly bill that I need to get from them, it's going to read my email. And as you saw, it's going to basically tell me, hey, there's a new item that we added from your email. And it's going to capture as an unbilled item so that you can accrue for that.
Yeah. Hey, Danny, just before you get too far, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out, which I thought was really interesting. So one, when Danny's saying she's in live sandbox, like that little kind of reddish amaranth color on top, that you're saying that right now within Everest, you're in a live sandbox environment, which I think is very specific, but essentially you're like a duplicative not duplicative instance, but like you have like a snapshot, you're in production, but you're in a safe space to build. I'm pointing this out because I think deployment is really new to most people that are building for the first time. So you're saying you can make any changes here, and this is where you're configuring your feature. So when you were further up in that box, you're choosing essentially the data tables, right, to bring in. So can you scroll up really quick to the that top part?
What part?
Oh, the where you had like unapproved bills and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Because I think this is like if I equate this, this is like your context engineering, right? Like if I was to put this all in a folder and run cowork on top of it, these are all of the files or the full like the pieces that you would have to pull together to say, I need these things to be related for me to do this. And in this case, it's just pulling the data tables, like you're choosing the data or the objects
Correct.
within your system. You're saying, I need all of this context. You as a subject matter expertise are the only one that would probably know that unapproved bills was even a thing without like a million back and forths with your dev. So now this is like that enablement where if I was building it in cowork, right, I would put it in that folder. Right now, I'm in a connected system. I'm in a sandbox. I can play. I can build. And this is kind of what you're doing here. Is that
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. So if I were to leave this sandbox, which I'm gonna do once I'm done with this demo to show that fix that I was trying to do myself and show that fix live as well. Yeah, so basically it's like you're spinning out as another version of production that you can do whatever you want. We use it a lot for development, like we test in system based on the changes that happen before they get to production. But from a business user standpoint, for accountants that are using our system, they can do business simulation. They can do a lot of stuff that they say, hey, what if I have, like if I were to do this accrual, like what if I have these accruals and what if not? And so I can see kind of the both versions and I can decide, hey, I want to stay with one. And instead of replicating that again in production, I can just merge that into production in a way that, kind of mixing the concept of what maybe GitHub and development uses. It's a way for like, if you were in other systems, you have to kind of get Sandbox up to speed, update it, and then what you do in Sandbox, you have to kind of replicate again in production. Here, we don't do that. We basically do it once and then we merge it.
All right. Thanks. Yeah. So it's a kind of a seamless deploy.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, sorry. Okay.
You're okay.
Continue.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, so then we have the ability of, let me unclick here, of, setting thresholds in the cases that you don't want to see every single line item for accruals. You have variances flagging, depends on, what are an unusual spend, the cutoff of when you want to start your accruals. And, those are like the configurations that they need to be set up first before you can, use this. Then, as I said before, like this line item got added because I had unbilled services sitting in my email that I got because I didn't get a bill. And so, in this case, I didn't get it wrong. I didn't get it right. And so I'm going to change it. It basically said, well, you put this under other, but technically I have an accrual for legal. So I'm changing it. And then, sorry. And then when I click here, you're going to see that if I didn't have the estimate, the tool would have told me, hey, your usual would have been X. I'm going to accrue based on your history. But because I got an unbilled accrual, I can basically just run by that and say, hey, I'm selecting that one. I don't need to do any bridge gap between what I have done in the past. That's already covered. And so I'm basically selecting that. So you can see like how the history versus what you're accruing for. You can also see here in the fact that you have, bills that you have received after the fact, but you want to account for in the month of closing. So this bill in the description and in the PDF, it assumes that it's for July services, but it got received in the following month. So in this case, AI took it as like, you have to review this. We are suggesting it because we know that this was for July. And then also for the unapproved bill, well, we got a bill in July. It got booked in July, but it's sitting in pending approval. And so now we're accounting for it for the case of the accrual until, if it doesn't get approved, then, it's just going to be understating our expenses. Same for this other bill here. We have another bill that was sitting unapproved for almost a month. We could reach out to the proper person to then, ask for approving, but what if, you have to kind of wait on them. So we're going to take the assumption that we're going to accrue for all this. In some cases, based on the expenses that you're receiving from actual bills, sometimes you may not have 100%. So this is assuming also a historical gap based on, maybe your expenses were, I don't know, 10,000, but your bill is 1. We look at the historical trend also and we capture the gap based on the 1,000 and then 10,000. So just for the sake of the example, I'm just going to go through and select all here. Here, include all. I have about almost 40K in accruals that I need to do. As you see, this flow sort of assumes sort of step-by-step workflow of how you should think about your accruals. So this is sort of the gathering of all the data and all the stuff that AI may consider. You also have ways of, hey, you want to prompt and create an accrual so that you don't have to create an accrual yourself. You can do that. Or if you have an external CSV that you want to bring over, you can do that too. You can drop it here and do that. Then we go to the next step. The reason why this is not showing anything is because if AI did not read some stuff and capture it, in this example, I assume that everything was. Let's say that you have some bill sitting in maybe pending approval or something, but they were related to the wrong month or something, it could have shown here. That way, you can actually take a step and look at anything else that you might need to review. Then this is more about like comparison, what was prior month versus what's today. In the past, I accrued for almost 4,000 for, I think it was Deloitte. And in this case, I said, hey, accrual for this in the actuals before I accrued, I had nothing. And so basically it's like, well, I'm still kind of, I had a miss of bills that I didn't receive. So in this case, I'm accruing for that. And this is also proposing sort of the accruals based on the same line items that I had. Then this is kind of like a preview before you book on how the balance sheet and your roll forward would look like, assuming all the line items that you selected before. So you can actually see like holistically for all these accounts, or you can look at it, line by line of, for accrual on accounting and CPA, I have 17K. For legal, I have almost 9K. And then for other, I have almost 13K. And so as you see, I have not posted it yet, but I have that visibility before it happens. And if I'm not tying to the GL, then it tells me in some cases, hey, you have things that are coming from manual journal entries. So that way you can account for those in the cases that, you may have some gap between your GL numbers and what this is coming from here. Then we jump into the draft journal entry where you can, rename it if you want to. You can select the date when you want to post it. You want to set the reversal if you like, the reversal type as well. And then also you can actually see, how your journal entry is going to be constructed and, the assumption of what that vendor looks like. And then we jump into the next step and you're going to see sort of like, kind of like a summary of what has happened so far. And then you can actually click post, and then this is going to give you a quick summary, and then you can click. Now, I mentioned before that there are some bugs here. When I say bugs, there are necessarily non-functional bugs in this case. So you see that I have a line item here for June. Ideally, it should not show June because I'm also looking at July. So, those type of things that are, maybe important for us, but maybe for some people that don't know much of accounting, it might be like, hey, I'm just showing you all the list of journal entries that are tied to it. And so I also mentioned before that there were some stuff that I was going to change, or I wanted to, like, I considered maybe like bugs or maybe enhancements that I wanted to do. So you see this line showing up here as July accrual. Oops, sorry. I can basically go to the journal entry and see it, but that's not what I was showing. But in this case, you can jump into it. I also have it here that I created. I don't want to show it twice. I also have this void action. I want to show it down here. This is technically maybe showing like a bug because I'm not waiting for the reversal because I technically already schedule it for the next month. And so I will show you in this kind of new path of how we're doing like PMs fixing stuff on our own with the help of AI. How I'm going to change this screen. So maybe take a quick peek on how this screen looks before I leave this sandbox, and I'm going to jump into another one. And then I'm going to show you these changes, in a few minutes. Maybe while we wait, I don't know, Angela, if you have any comments or anything, I can maybe jump. I'm going to jump into the other sandbox, and you'll see like I'm leaving this. You see the red line or like the orangey line is going away. And then I am jumping back here to this. This is the fixes that were done, but I wanted to show you real quick. So I use AI to create this ticket by providing context via Slack. It's like, hey, you want to fix this? And so it's like, what's the current behavior? I provided images. Here's the expected behavior. I got a sandbox. I tested it. I was like, I still think there needs to some fixes. Then I added additional context somewhere down here. It's like, hey, add these additional things. And so with that, I already had I can access the sandbox from here, but I already had it up. And so I'm gonna enter the sandbox
Yeah.
and I'm gonna go back to that same screen, but for basically you can see the changes.
Okay, wait. So I just want to understand the thing. So when you're going through July, you saw that there was June there, but it shouldn't have been there. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so you know that June shouldn't be there because you're doing July accruals. I just want to make sure I understand like
Yeah.
the what. Okay.
Yeah. But also the way that it was showing the line for, I would basically had duplicate July accrual journal. I had one on the top and I had one on the bottom. That's what I'm changing. Not that
Okay.
much the change of the June not showing here, but I wanted to do simple changes. I didn't want to break anything yet.
Okay. And then did you investigate the why? Or what are you like how are you troubleshooting that? Because I'm assuming like you did the build, you gave it to Claude Design, they did the first round of it, and then you're doing a build. So now you're almost in like a testing phase, is that right?
Yeah.
Or okay. So now we're in testing and you're seeing that it's pulling up an object or an invoice that is in the wrong period.
No, it basically took the journal entry that I had created the prior month, but it showed it in this month. Basically, I'm looking at July. June should not have shown.
Ah, okay. I
Yeah.
think it's like, okay, we talked about this before. This is like a very common problem, like the posting period problem of like, how does the system know what date it should be using for the context for any given menu? I'm mentioning this because I think this is something that everyone is going to hit as they build. Like dates, if you think about any object, there's like 15 date tables and like so many different tables. And so you actually need to know what date you're using. And a posting period date is a different object typically than like a transaction date. So in this case, maybe it's like it's a July posting, but it should you posted it transactionally in July, but it should be for June or vice versa. But you have to give that context of what date. And you're finding that something happened in the wrong place and now you're troubleshooting it. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of. So right now, I think it got posted correctly. It's just a matter of how it's viewing in that, call it repository of journal entries. Instead of me showing all journal entries that got posted for the accruals, I just want to show the ones that are related to July, not everything.
Oh, so you're trying to do like a filter almost. Like you're
Kind of.
fixing it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's showing things that I had posted before, which, if I have the day picker or like the period picker just for July, it's like, why would you want to show it? It's like if I have financial statements, well, you don't want to have historical, you just want to have the period that you're looking at
Okay.
on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Okay, let me jump into this real quick. So this is loading. Before we were looking at July, now we're looking at August, but not because of the data that I was showing before. So the June thing that I was showing before, I did not fix that. What I was fixing were things that were not functional. They were more like how we were showing things. So if I look at the journal here, you see that I had a number 6 before. I don't have it anymore. I had there a waiting reversal before. I don't have that anymore. Now it shows as scheduled because it's looking at what's happening in the future. And if you remember, I had a line up here that duplicated what I had, booked. So in this case, if I were to have the view that we had before, it would show, this JE 84389 up here with a void action. In this case, it only shows one, and we move the void action from up here down here. So that way I don't have, too much information showing the same thing. I could have added the additional fixes into that one, but I prefer to go smaller and do the fixes than creating big, because then it can create more issues. Kind of going back to the context that I mentioned before, the more you give, sometimes the worse it can get you. So when you're thinking about fixing or when you're thinking about going, just go a little bit at a time. Like small iterations sometimes can be more impactful than, just bigger changes. So I'll pause here. I don't know, Angela, if you had any questions on
Yeah.
it. If not, I can go back to the slide deck.
Well, I want you to maybe slow down on one thing because I thought it was really cool when we talked about demo. And then there's a question that I think is very relevant to there. Can you show me again kind of that like bug fixing? Because when you're kind of describing these things and you want to revert or you're trying to change a functionality, or iterate on a function, in a kind of streamlined production or software development process, you actually go through tickets,
Yes.
right? I think that's what you were showing.
Yes, this one.
And the ticketing process typically is a manual like Jira ticket or a GitHub ticket that you have to fill out and say, this is what's wrong. Here's the expected behavior, current behavior. This one's super well formatted, but typically, or in the past, and this is what I remember from when I was there, I was like, it is someone's job to fill out these tickets, to take the screenshots, to describe what's wrong, and then you chuck it over the line and then hope the developers can like figure it out.
Yeah.
And then they get
Yeah.
back to you. Yeah.
And it's one of the most annoying things, you know, you have to kind of explain and put all this context in a ticket. To be honest, creating tickets, it's not the most fascinating thing about product management.
It's not, but it's the change
It is a
management
change management, yeah.
that we all need to do as accountants too. So I kind of want to slow down here because this is
Yeah.
super important in terms of like, okay, you got the thing to 80%, but now you have to iterate, but you have to iterate responsibly with a change log, right? This is that. And so a typical Git ticket, I think what you showed me is that this is actually typically you'd have to go into like a GitHub or a Jira and like fill out this ticket, tag what it's related to, ship that over the fence. And did you show the at lensing part?
Yeah, right here.
Okay. Because this is what's interesting. So now with the new AI features, even in your software development process, instead you're doing at lensing in your Slack channel, right? And this is basically the at Claude tag that came out about a month ago within Claude, where within Claude you can then call to the model, and now is the model is actually creating the ticket for you, right? So that perfect structure that you just showed us, the model is actually saying this is what it's kind of doing that first round of triage. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a bot, well, several bots within Slack. And then so I provided all this context in that Slack channel or in that Slack. And then I basically put everything that I wanted or everything that you see up here. Instead of me creating the ticket and putting it all in the ticket, I did it via the bot and then it structured based on what I was asking. And all I gave maybe 3 sentences or 2 sentences of what I wanted. And with the images, it was able to provide the context. Of course, you have to review it because sometimes you can say wonky things, but the structure and all that is kind of formatted to a way that maybe developers or maybe AI could understand, in the fixing phase.
Yeah. And it's doing these screenshots because the picture's worth 1,000 words, and screenshots are actually often the way you troubleshoot within AI, which is like, this is what it is, and it's doing that triage. Is that right? Is it actually doing the first round of the fix too?
Yeah, so I ask, so this part here was like me kind of throwing the ball to AI to say, hey, go take a look and fix it. And so it started doing this. It's like, hey, we look at this and we started doing that. And so it basically was working in the background while I was going doing other stuff. And because it's not changes in production and there were changes done in these live sandboxes, I can then just, go take a look at any point in time later.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. I just want to slow that down because I think that this is
Yeah.
quite a new and novel thing about what's speeding up the process is that you're actually getting to all the hard bugs faster,
Yeah.
which means that you're exercising judgment and making decisions a lot faster now in your software development lifecycle.
Yeah, and maybe to add like a little comment there, I think with the tools that we have available now, it's now we needed to wait on developers to, whenever they had time, capacity, and resources to be able to do these. Now we have basically a tool in the PM's hands, or maybe at some point, in other hands too, and being able to say, hey, I made the fix, I'm reviewing it, I'm th seeing that everything looks good. and then I'm just throwing the ball to the developer and say, hey, can you take a look, review it, and then if it's good, go ahead and approve it. So they don't have to necessarily, I don't want to call it waste time in that. If I want to push a fix, they can maybe rely on other resources, not just on the dev team to do that. So
Yeah.
things are moving much faster now than before.
Yeah. You really have a lot more enablement in your hands to continuously update your subject or show your subject matter expertise instead of being that translation layer, which is
Yeah,
really interesting.
that's correct.
Okay. We are very close on time, and I'm so sorry. I just wanted to make sure that you showed this feature, but we have about 4 minutes left. There are some questions. Do we
I
want to
just
go?
have one more slide from the
Okay.
lessons learned. I think maybe
Yes,
those
yes,
can
please do.
clarify some questions. Let me just jump into it real quick. Yeah, so I think I wanted to go through this as, what I learned throughout the process of changing from accounting to product management is product management is all about the why. It's understanding, the customer problem, but also like understanding what you're trying to solve for. The second one, accountants know the domain, but that's not enough. You have to kind of think how you want a feature to work from the get-go. Kind of I mentioned before, like you have to think about all the different pieces. Three, if you're using AI to build, focus on the edge cases as well, or more thoughtfully, because maybe AI doesn't know that context, and so you want to make sure that you're giving that domain that you have into what AI is doing. And then last but not least, well, now because we have the tools and we have AI, you can basically produce the first screens yourself and explain to others what you mean by it. And maybe hopefully things don't get lost in translation because now you can actually showcase, in visualization what you mean by your words. So this is all I had, but I'll pass it back to you, Angela.
All right. I did want to get to maybe one. We'll do two questions. If we run a couple minutes over, just know that that's but one of them I did think this one was really good, which was like, how do you think about the balance between refining existing features and launching new functionality and integrations, especially when you're thinking about like edge cases and like because I think that like scoping is actually the hardest part. I think about it, like when does one feature begin or end? How do you think about that in terms of your scope?
Yeah, I think it's easier to start a net new feature than adding on to an existing one. Because then you have to think about all the things that an existing feature has, and you want to make sure that you're not breaking that. And so that probably takes, when you think about that 80-20%, that 20%, can maybe feel much bigger because you want to make sure that you're capturing the new use cases, but with the assumption of not breaking anything that exists, and that everything kind of feels part of the same application or the same feature. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah. Um, and then maybe there's now more questions coming in. Uh, I think it's kind of fun to answer these while this is a little fresh. So please tell me if we need to stop. And then we can also do more questions when we deliver the recording or do another session. But along that same vein, like how do you determine the prioritization in the product design? I think that's really like always top of mind of like, what do I hit first? How do you scope out?
Yeah, so there's kind of different components about it. We consider, what are the required things that we need to commit or that we have committed for like go live. We are a new product, and so sometimes we don't have things when we have customers joining us. So, but we may do those as part of their go live requirements, to make sure that they have the proper solution for the use cases that they have. And so, we capture those, and then we also capture, maybe customers that are already existing in lensing that they have hit maybe new use cases. So we go through processes into looking, what our backlog is. We review those. We kind of see kind of the priority, who has, if it's one-off request for one customer, we kind of look at the broader, scope of different customers who's asking for that or may have different use cases. But, maybe because one person has one use case, that doesn't mean it's not important. We also look at the needs. If we have workarounds in the system to do that, maybe we don't build it right away, but we provide the customers, those workarounds so that if we don't build it right away, then we can go build it later and provide that update to the customer.
All right, thank you. And Sandeep, I want to direct a couple questions to you. I know we're going over, but I also recognize it's going to be part of the recording, so I think it's worth it. So hopefully that's fine. Um, a question for you. Uh, are there things that have been made worse by AI or stuff that we should be aware of? I think this is really interesting from that product lens. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news from my point of view is the value of domain expertise goes up, not down with AI. And the reason why I say that is because what AI is really good at is like generating lots and lots of options. So in some ways, what it substitutes for faster is a more junior generalist product manager, if that makes sense. But as you probably know, playing with AI, you can get it to change its mind very quickly by providing it one more piece of information. So the question always becomes, who is the human that's providing that one tidbit of information that actually causes you to change its mind? To me, that person is going to be the person who has the deepest empathy, the best intuition for what is the problem they're trying to solve, which comes from my experience, the one that's either the domain expert themselves or working closely with the domain experts on the customer side.
Cool. I think that's super helpful. Sandeep, I just wanted that point that you meant, which is like it gets really dicey who's making the decision at some point when you've been hanging out with AI too long. I feel like I am I have fallen into that trap where I'm like, am I just here to press buttons? And I feel like I'm the bottleneck. So like that, like staying in the driver's seat and your subject matter expertise being more important. And I just realized you said you can give it one more piece of information and it immediately changes his mind, which I was like, wait, does that make it the best product manager or the worst product manager? Based on what we talked about before. Um, so, uh, does that kind of change your way and what you look for as you hire? That was Angelica's question as well, which is like, what are the main skills you pay attention to when you're hiring accountants for this role now?
Yeah, I think there are two kind of divergent set of skills from my point of view. First of all, I think I would say before I get into that, it really matters like what product you're trying to build, right? Like if you're trying to build, like an expense management product, right? That's a very different product than building a product that's going to do internationalization, localization, intercompany requirements. Like one is a much more domain-rich product by definition than the other. So I think if you kind of have to know where you're aiming. Like we knew from day one, for example, that we wanted to go really deep on revenue accounting, like within the first 2 months of the company. So we had to hire, for example, people with deep expertise in that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a chance. Now having said that, I think the kind of two opposite things in a way you look for. One is like what is the thing that they're best at? Like given their domain knowledge, like what is the thing that is like they're kind of world class at? Is it that like in Danny's case, for example, at Docker, she had all this experience with international entities, like there were 13 entities, I believe, at time with Docker. And then she had experiences in her career that were the international experiences, but then also early controller experiences when she was responsible for the whole accounting function at a company. So I think looking for some very specific skills that you have that are deep, that make you kind of that domain expert where your intuition becomes healthy and important. And then at the same time, you look for someone, maybe that sounds a little bit hard to say now, right? It's just when that person can also be humble enough and change their mind pretty quickly, right? So when you are interviewing them, one thing we always look for is we give them an exercise that's an area of strength of theirs, but then we keep peppering them with questions to see is there presented more information? How do they react to that new information? Are they able to change the solution to the problem? Or at least say, I don't know. Let me come back to you on that. Because sometimes the answer really is, well, that's a good new piece of information. What I said yesterday now is invalid. I don't know the new valid answer yet, but I got to go think about it for 3 hours. And so I think those are the two main traits that we look for simultaneously.
Wow. Very cool. Yeah, it's really interesting how fast this is morphing. I'm gonna go to maybe the last question that we can close on. We got a question of what projects can I do to get some experience to build a resume? This is a weird question that like everyone's kind of asking right now because it's like, what job am I even applying for? Whether you're an accountant or not, you're building a little bit. Um, uh, they see the overlap in what Danny mentioned and how you positioned yourself as a product manager during interviews. But Danny, I also know that you were doing a lot of things before this. Like you had your MBA program, you were super curious about this. You're kind of there were classes in coding that you were taking. Um, Tell us a little bit about what experience maybe you did to build, and now that you're in the seat, what would you kind of be looking for from other people? Not that this is a hiring call, but I think it's an interesting transition of skills that we're all in. So I think it's a relevant question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I always try to remember, kind of what I was doing kind of before and applying that to what I'm doing now. Yes, in that MBA program that I had, we did have kind of like a business analytics, but the professor just wanted to go and use Python instead of just normal Excel at that time. And so, we had to kind of learn the business analysis analytics and also look at, coding and kind of learning in parallel. To be honest, I have no technical background. Like I have MBA, which, the only class that I had was that. But I do think it is what I find very interesting is like curiosity. It's like, I'm always trying to learn, new things when, you know, maybe in 2020 when it was about blockchain and crypto, like I took a course on that. And so now with AI, like, there's a lot of courses out there. There's a lot of webinars, a lot of things that I think you can learn from that. But if you want to play and try to do things yourself, get Claude or get tools like that, and just start with something that you know. Like if you have a spreadsheet or if you have something that you want to automate, or you just want to see how that spreadsheet could look like in Claude, then play with it, iterate, and there are other tools that if you want to make that spreadsheet a actual application or something like that, that becomes a little more complicated. But I think Claude can actually help you. Like, how do I do this? And it can actually let you iterate on top of that, so that you don't have to kind of self do it. You can actually get the help from Claude on that. So I think curiosity is one of the things that I think is the most important about what you want to learn and how you can maybe improve in your own areas, even from accounting, but also in product management.
Yeah. Thanks, Danny. And Sandeep, do you have anything to round out that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think Danny said it really well. I think I think it's these are all learnable skills. Like if you look at like if you were to look at like 1,000 product manager profiles on LinkedIn, you might be surprised. You're not going to find like patterns like you see in development or accounting, for example. Product management is not a subject that people teach in maybe there are courses in product management, but ultimately you have to start from something. So I think there's great product managers that come from technology side for certain kinds of products. And I think for business software, especially domain-rich products, it's not weird or surprising at all that like a lot of great product managers come from a deep domain background as well.
Yeah. It was always very interesting to see like how you picked each person that came in, whether it was something like, for Danny's first slide, that journey of like coming from Venezuela, like going through different ways. But it really is like people that can pivot, change their mind, do the next thing. And sometimes you can even see that in the resume.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is, there's a career story, there's a career arc. And I think that, people that are generally there's like luck and timing and all these things, but people that are a bit more intentional about the next thing, right? Which is like, I want to go learn this thing next. I want to go experience that. I think that ends up being quite helpful, especially for early stage product management, because so much of it is you're trying to figure out product market fit, right? It's not steady yet. And so you have to figure out the customer, figure out the sales, figure out the service. And so figuring that out basically means venturing in the unknown, right? So that's where the mindset is so important.
I love that. I think we're all very much in the unknown now in the world of AI. So, um, with that, I'll close it. Venturing into the unknown might be that quality. Thank you so much for taking the time this morning for everyone that joined, Sandeep, Danny. This was super fun to put together to kind of help everyone kind of change mindset or like grow into that next phase of what it might look like to be a human accountant or a human product manager, or maybe kind of both. So thanks, everyone. We'll close out today. Thanks for joining.